Thank you for joining Detective Duo, your companion for stories of wit, charm, and quiet suspense, the kind Tommy and Tuppence might have uncovered in their early adventures. Subscribe for more of these mysteries, and let us know where you're listening from. Tuppence Beresford had developed, over the course of a marriage built on equal parts affection and mischief, a particular sensitivity to small human oddities. She noticed the way people rearranged their faces when embarrassed, the awkward shuffle of feet when someone tried to pretend nothing was wrong, the brief catch in breath that revealed far more than words could. So, when she heard the elderly widow at the Portobello Road bookstall declare, with quivering outrage, that she had been given the wrong letter, Tuppence's interest rose exactly the way a cat's tail twitches when it smells a riddle. She nudged Tommy's elbow with a gentle insistence that meant, "Pay attention, darling, the world is about to serve something curious." The bookseller, a wiry man with spectacles that always seemed in peril of falling off, blinked at the widow as if she had told him his stall had sold her a bucket of live eels instead of a Christopher Morley novel. "Madam, I assure you," he stammered, "I sold you precisely what you paid for. A book. Only the book. Nothing more." His voice contained that well-worn tiredness particular to London merchants who had been arguing with customers since the days of gas lamps. The widow clutched her handbag to her chest. "You don't understand. My husband left me a letter, a very important letter. I hid it inside that book. I came back to fetch it today and—" Her voice collapsed into a tight, frustrated whisper. "It is not there." Tommy, who had been trying to decide whether he preferred the look of a battered travel memoir or a volume promising tales of Himalayan misadventures, turned to glance at Tuppence. Her eyebrows, usually expressive enough to carry half her conversations, were raised with unmistakable signal. Something is off here, and isn't it glorious? "Perhaps the lady misplaced her book," Tommy suggested lightly, more to see how Tuppence would react. He knew she was already storing every detail away. The widow shook her head with determined sorrow. "I know what I bought, and I know what should have been inside it." She tapped the book with trembling fingers. "My husband was a government clerk during the war, dull as boiled cabbage most days, but he brought back one letter he said I must keep safe. I thought the book would be safe enough." A faint, rueful smile appeared. Apparently not. She left soon after, her posture rigid with humiliation and grief. Tuppence followed her with her gaze until the woman disappeared into the crowd of weekend browsers. Then she turned to the bookseller with the polite yet dangerous look of someone who will get the truth, whether or not the truth feels ready to be caught. "Was there ever a letter inside it?" she asked casually. The bookseller hesitated. His spectacles slipped, his fingers twitched. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "I thought it was trash. You know how people leave things in books? Train tickets, grocery lists, odd scraps. I threw it away this morning." "Threw it away?" Tuppence repeated, horrified. "Well, burned it, actually," he added, as though that made things better. "It looked old and foreign. Some German phrase on the envelope, if I remember correctly. Something like Für England allein, das Geheimnis bleibt." Tommy straightened. He had not twitched like that since their intelligence days. "You're sure those were the words?" "As sure as I can be," said the bookseller, now fully aware he had stumbled into something far outside the domain of used paperbacks. Tuppence's lips tightened. "And you burned it?" "Yes," he admitted, visibly shrinking under the weight of her stare. Seemed sensible at the time. Before Tuppence could protest further, a faint commotion erupted just beyond the stall. A small crowd had formed near the pavement, people murmuring with that soft, anxious curiosity reserved for sudden mishaps. Tommy moved first, Tuppence beside him. There, lying on the ground as though the world had pulled the rug from under her, was the widow. Her handbag had spilled open, its contents scattered like clues. Tommy crouched immediately. "Give her air," he said with calm authority, and the surrounding onlookers obeyed. The widow's eyelids fluttered. Her breath came in short, desperate bursts. When she recognized Tommy leaning over her, something blazing with fear and urgency lit her gaze. "Find it," she whispered. "Find the truth before they do." Her frail hand gripped Tommy's sleeve with surprising strength. "It concerns Hitler, inside England." Tommy felt Tuppence freeze beside him. Before he could ask who they were, the widow went limp. A man from the crowd shouted for help, and within minutes an ambulance arrived. The paramedics treated the matter with brisk competence, lifting her onto a stretcher. As they worked, one paramedic frowned at her pulse and exchanged a loaded glance with his colleague. Tuppence stepped closer. "Will she be all right?" "We'll do everything we can, madam," the paramedic said, which was the sort of answer a trained ear immediately recognized as professional code for, "We simply don't know." The ambulance doors shut, snapping the moment in half. The vehicle sped away, leaving behind an echo of confusion, the scent of petrol, and a pair of detectives standing in the middle of Portobello Road, with the distinct sensation that an ordinary London morning had just shifted into something darker. Tommy exhaled slowly. "Well," he murmured, "that was unexpected." "That," Tuppence retorted sharply, "was a warning wrapped in melodrama and tied with a bow of secrecy. We cannot leave this alone." Tommy gave her a thoughtful look. The phrase on the envelope, "For England alone, the secret remains." That's not the sort of sentiment one burns without consequence. She folded her arms. "You don't say." He grinned faintly. "You're itching to investigate, aren't you?" "Tommy," Tuppence said, "when an elderly widow collapses at our feet after speaking of Hitler and secrets inside England, itching barely covers it." They returned to the bookseller, who was wringing his hands like a man fearing he had accidentally consigned national treasure to the ashbin. "If I had known, if she had said—" "She didn't want anyone to know," Tuppence said gently, "but someone else clearly did." Tommy leaned against the stall. "Do you recall what the letter looked like? Anything distinctive?" The bookseller swallowed. Old parchment, a dark red wax seal, and the handwriting. You could tell it was the sort written by someone who wanted each letter to behave. Careful strokes. German, I think. "And you saw no other markings?" Tuppence pressed. He nodded. A small pressed flower stuck to the back. Purple, like a violet. Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a quick glance. That single detail, delicate as it seemed, had the eerie weight of significance. Flowers in letters tended to mean romance, remembrance, apology, or code. "Thank you," Tommy said. "If anything else comes to mind, even something trivial, leave a note for us. We'll check in." The bookseller agreed wholeheartedly, eager to redeem himself by offering any assistance short of time travel. As Tommy and Tuppence walked away, she tapped her chin in thought. A missing wartime letter, a dying widow, a German inscription, a violet, and something concerning Hitler hidden inside England. Her eyes glittered. "Tommy, this feels rather like one of our old cases." "I had hoped retirement might involve fewer collapsing strangers," he said dryly. "Nonsense," Tuppence declared. "This is precisely what retirement should include. Otherwise one ends up gardening." Tommy offered his arm and she looped hers through it. They moved down the bustling street, surrounded by the clamour of traders selling curiosities, the faint clatter of teacups from a nearby cafe, and the lively hum of a weekend crowd. Yet the atmosphere between them carried a tension that had nothing to do with commerce or chatter. Something dangerous had slipped into their path. Something from the war. Something that had waited decades to surface. Tuppence glanced upward, her tone shifting into the low, decisive register Tommy knew well. "We must find that letter, burned or not. Secrets don't vanish merely because they're turned to ash. They linger, and they lead." Tommy nodded. "Then we follow." And so the Beresfords stepped back into the shadows of a world they once knew intimately, a world where secrets whispered beneath ordinary life, where the past reached forward with cold fingers, and where even a forgotten letter inside an old book could change everything. News has an uncanny habit of arriving at the very moment one is least prepared to swallow it. For Tommy and Tuppence, it arrived just as they were sitting down to breakfast, tea poured, toast buttered, and the agreeable silence of a shared morning hovering between them. Tuppence was just remarking that she might pay another visit to Portobello Road to inquire about any forgotten scraps in the bookseller's rubbish bin, when the telephone shattered the calm with its shrill, insistent cry. Tommy rose, muttering, "If this is someone wanting to know whether we've considered changing electricity providers, I shall commit an act of violence." He lifted the receiver. "Beresford residence." The shift in his posture was immediate. His spine straightened, his expression tightened, and he pressed the receiver closer to his ear. "I see. When? Yes, of course. Thank you." He hung up slowly. Tuppence set down her teacup. "Tommy, don't you dare say something ominous while standing dramatically like that." He sank into his chair with a sigh. The widow, Mrs. Grant, died last night. Tuppence blinked once, then twice. No. Heart complications, supposedly. Tommy's tone suggested he believed the word supposedly deserved its own interrogation. Tuppence's voice lowered. She was frightened, Tommy. Terrified. People don't simply collapse from fear and die neatly overnight. Some do, he conceded. But Eloise Grant did not seem the type to expire from nerves. Exactly. She rose abruptly, her chair scraping softly across the floor. We must see Marwick. Inspector Andrew Marwick had once been their wartime contact, a man of blunt edges, cautious kindness, and the perpetual squint of someone who mistrusted the world on principle. He had managed to survive government bureaucracy without losing his humanity, which was a feat Tuppence considered worthy of a knighthood. When they entered his modest office at Scotland Yard, he looked up with weary recognition. "Oh, it's you two," he grumbled. "I should have known a death with odd angles would lure you out of peaceful living." "We weren't exactly summoned by trumpets," Tommy replied, "but we happened to know Mrs. Grant." Marwick motioned them to sit. Her real name was Eloise Grant, yes. Widow of Arthur Grant, Ministry of Information officer during the war. Worked in a department dealing with propaganda, censorship, and sorting through intercepted enemy documents. Nothing glamorous, mind you, but important. Tuppence leaned forward. "We were with her yesterday when she collapsed. She mentioned something of grave importance connected to Hitler, and a letter her husband left behind." Marwick rubbed his forehead. Yes, the letter. We searched her effects. Nothing." "That's because someone got to it first," Tuppence declared. "We believe her flat may have been entered before or after her collapse." Marwick raised an eyebrow. "You believe she was murdered?" "We believe coincidence is the laziest explanation," Tuppence said crisply. The inspector exhaled. "Very well. I'll authorize your visit to the flat, but be discreet. Her next of kin is non-existent, and the ministry doesn't like attention drawn to old files." Tommy and Tuppence promised discretion, though neither had ever excelled at subtlety when faced with intrigue. Mrs. Grant's Pimlico flat sat in a narrow building where the wallpaper in the hallway had started peeling in patterns reminiscent of neglected lace. The kind of place where neighbours memorised every footstep and kettle whistle. Tommy opened the door with the key Marwick had provided, and they entered a world that froze, at least momentarily, in the image of loneliness. The sitting room was neat, modest, and still faintly scented with lavender polish. A teacup sat on the small table near the armchair, as if Mrs. Grant might return at any moment to finish it. Tuppence scanned the room with a sharp, investigative calm. "She lived tidily," she murmured. "No clutter, everything in its place." Tommy tested the desk drawers. Except this one. He tugged a drawer and found it stuck. After a firm pull, it slid open with a harsh rasp, revealing splintered wood and a snapped lock. "Someone forced it," he said. Inside, the drawer was almost bare. A pale rectangle of clean wood showed exactly where an envelope had rested for years. Tuppence ran a fingertip along the outline. "Something lay here for a long time," she murmured, "and someone removed it in a hurry." She felt along the inner edges of the drawer. Her fingers paused. "Tommy, pass me the penknife." He handed it over, and she wedged the blade between the back wall of the drawer and the structure. A small panel shifted, revealing a tiny crevice. Inside lay a delicate pressed violet, its petals faded but intact. Tuppence held it as though it were a relic. A violet. The bookseller mentioned one, remember? A flower on the envelope. How did this get here? Tommy frowned. It was hidden deliberately. Someone came here hoping to retrieve something valuable, and left unsatisfied. Tuppence studied the flower. During the war, violets were sometimes used as tokens. Lovers, spies, secret couriers, they all had their rituals. A pressed flower was a discreet signal. Signal for what? That is what we must discover. They continued searching. The flat gave up no diaries, no coded notebooks, no meaningful photographs. Only ordinary objects belonging to an ordinary woman, except for the single extraordinary secret she had carried silently for decades. As they prepared to leave, a soft voice called from the hallway. Excuse me, are you relatives of Mrs. Grant?" An elderly neighbour, her posture bent but her eyes sharp, approached cautiously. Tuppence smiled warmly. "No, dear, we're assisting with arrangements." The neighbour lowered her voice. "There was a gentleman here last night, after she was taken away. I thought he might be her nephew or some such, but—" She hesitated. He wore a grey overcoat, tall, quiet. He stood by the door for several minutes listening, then walked away very quickly. Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a look filled with the electricity of immediate suspicion. "What did he look like?" Tommy asked. "Oh, I didn't see his face properly. He kept his head down, but his coat, long, grey, foreign-looking, and his shoes, well, they were rather fine. Not English. Continental, perhaps." "Did he knock?" Tuppence asked. "No, he simply stood there, as if deciding whether to go inside." The neighbour shivered. "I didn't like it." Tommy thanked her and assured her they would handle things. When she retreated to her flat, Tuppence turned to Tommy with a spark of certainty. "The man in the grey overcoat. He was at Portobello Road as well. That bookseller mentioned a stranger lingering earlier that day. And now he's connected to Eloise Grant." Tommy buttoned his coat. "This is no coincidence. Someone is searching as desperately as we are." Tuppence nodded, "but with far colder motives." They headed down the stairs, the pressed violet carefully preserved between thin sheets of paper Tuppence had taken from a notebook. Outside, the sounds of London traffic hummed with their familiar indifference, but neither Tommy nor Tuppence felt the comfort of routine. An invisible thread tugged them forward, one that connected a dead widow, a burnt wartime letter, and a stranger who moved like a shadow through the city. When they reached the pavement, Tuppence paused, her hand resting lightly on Tommy's arm. "We are not merely chasing a secret," she said softly. "Someone else is chasing it too, and they are willing to frighten an old woman into silence, or worse." Tommy's expression hardened. "Then we must get there first." Tuppence smiled faintly. "Ah, Tommy, back to our old habits." "Indeed, and given the stakes, I expect we'll need every one of them." Together they walked away from the quiet building that had held Eloise Grant's final secrets, carrying with them a single pressed violet and the unshakable certainty that the past was no longer content to remain buried. The dead widow had left them with a live question, one that demanded answers before the unseen hunter in the grey overcoat found them first. Sir Reginald Farrar began speaking before Tommy had even stepped fully into the room. "No names," he snapped, gripping the arm of his chair as though steadying himself against a sudden gust. "No repeating any part of this conversation. No implying, hinting, or whispering that we spoke at all. If you cannot promise that, kindly turn around and forget you ever knocked on my door." Tommy closed the door carefully behind him, measuring the older man's agitation. "It's been nearly 30 years since the war, Sir Reginald. You can relax. I didn't come here with a mob of journalists." "Relax?" Farrar barked. He was tall even while seated, his once grand posture now sagging beneath years of secrets. "Relaxing is for the ignorant. I have survived this long precisely because I have never relaxed." Tommy offered a mild, soothing smile. "We only seek clarity. A woman is dead. Eloise Grant." Farrar's expression froze. "Dead? When?" "Early this morning." He shut his eyes, leaning back as though something heavy had landed on his chest. "Arthur Grant tried to warn her. Fool man. Foolish loyalty to decency." He exhaled shakily. "Very well. Sit, but say nothing until I finish." Tommy obeyed, sinking into the small leather armchair opposite him. Farrar's study felt like the sort of room where truths did not emerge willingly. Dimly lit, curtains drawn, air thick with a mixture of pipe smoke and dust. Papers lay in neat but ominous stacks, as if each pile contained a chapter of history nobody wanted to read. "It began," Farrar said in a low voice, "with a defector, a German, not a common soldier, but a man of higher standing, high enough to obtain a message, one single message that Hitler feared above all else, a message that would, had it been made public, torn the fabric of his mythology." Tommy leaned forward. "What sort of message?" Farrar shook his head violently. "Don't ask. Information like that destroys people, entire nations even. What matters is that this defector wanted the world to know. He chose England, smuggled the document across in 44. And it was given to Arthur Grant, Tommy deduced. Smuggled into the country, yes. Whether Arthur ever saw it, I cannot say. But it passed through the ministry somewhere, and then his voice thinned. It vanished. Tommy's pulse quickened. Vanished how? Stolen? Hidden? Destroyed? That, Mr. Beresford, is the wrong question. Farrar's eyes, sharp despite his age, fixed on him. Ask instead, who wanted it gone, and who wants it now? Before Tommy could press further, Farrar rose abruptly, pacing in short, distressed strides. I've said too much. You're dredging up a matter wrapped in layers far deeper than you imagine. Some secrets are best left. Buried, Tommy supplied, gently but firmly. Farrar stopped pacing. His gaze hardened. Yes, buried, sealed, forgotten, for the good of everyone. Tommy stood as well. A woman died trying to pass it on. That suggests the past is no longer content to stay buried. For a moment the older man looked genuinely afraid. Then he stepped forward as if to usher Tommy out. You must leave, now, immediately. Sir Reginald, go, Beresford. His voice trembled. Go before you bring attention neither of us can afford. Tommy left because pressing further would win nothing. Farrar's fear was a wall nothing short of catastrophe would crack. He stepped outside the townhouse into the late morning bustle of Westminster, feeling the weight of Farrar's half-formed revelations pressing against him like a tightening band. Hitler's secret, a vanished document, a defector, a widow dead before she could speak. Tuppence, he thought, would already be diving into the other side of the puzzle. The British Library smelled of paper, polish, and history, everything that made Tuppence feel simultaneously at home and mildly suspicious. She believed firmly that institutions housing old secrets tended to preserve a few new ones as well, tucked discreetly between catalogue cards and stacks of forgotten files. She marched to the wartime archives with the confidence of a woman convinced that librarians secretly ran the world, and that befriending them was always advantageous. The archivist, a bespectacled man who looked startled by enthusiasm, blinked as she requested specific access to Ministry of Information files related to regional insignia and field correspondence from minor intelligence units operating domestically between 43 and 45. That is quite narrow, he murmured. Quite, Tuppence replied pleasantly. Within 20 minutes, Tuppence sat at a long wooden table surrounded by folders, brittle papers, and handwritten binders. She opened each with methodical care. She searched not for obvious information. Those rare golden threads were almost always hidden behind mundane details. The pressed violet, preserved in her notebook, lay beside her as reference. Her fingers traced over insignia sketches, signals groups, courier units, listening teams operating in rural districts, and then, there it was, a violet symbol. Infantry? No. Medical? No. Her eyes narrowed. Intelligence Unit 14V. A small, discreet wartime group stationed in Oxfordshire, specialising in coded transmissions and decrypting intercepted German communications. Their insignia, a violet flower enclosed in a circle. Unofficial. Chosen internally, she noted. Most startling of all, several names underlined in red ink indicating unusual or abrupt deaths after 1946. Accidents, Tuppence murmured aloud, reading the descriptions. Car crash, unexpected illness, gas leak, drowning, 4 deaths, all within 3 years. Coincidence was a flimsy concept in her personal dictionary. She flipped through a thick report describing one of the unit's final assignments, a German defector, an intercepted high-value document, a sealed package transferred to London, and then nothing. The record ended abruptly, as if the story itself had been lifted from the page. She straightened slowly, tension pooling around her shoulders. The violet wasn't merely a romantic gesture, it was a symbol linked to a faction that handled dangerous information. The kind of information that would make a man in a grey overcoat lurk outside a widow's flat decades later. The archivist approached timidly. Everything all right? Tuppence smiled with deceptive sweetness. Everything is fascinating, thank you. He retreated promptly. She gathered her notes, her pace quickening. She had pieces now, thorny, incomplete but undeniably connected. Now she needed Tommy's half. She headed toward the exit, already forming a plan for an urgent discussion over supper. But as she stepped outside, she caught sight of a man across the street watching the entrance. Tall, grey overcoat, hat lowered just enough to shield his eyes. A chill skated down her spine. She did not slow, did not stare, did not let her stride falter. Instead, she hailed the first cab she saw, slipping inside with composed urgency. As they pulled away, she dared a glance through the rear window. The man was still watching, and then he vanished into the crowd. Tommy returned home an hour before Tuppence, pacing the sitting room while rehearsing how best to summarize Farah's revelations. When she arrived, the urgency in her steps told him she too brought news heavy enough to unsettle their entire evening. "Tommy," she began breathlessly, "we are in deeper than we thought." "So am I," he said. "Sit. We need to compare notes." They shared discoveries the way two puzzle solvers fit pieces together, swiftly, eagerly, and with gathering dread. By the time the last detail landed between them, Farah's panic, the intelligence insignia, the mysterious deaths, they both sat very still. "It's a secret," Tommy concluded quietly, "that someone has killed to protect for decades, and killed again to obtain now. And someone else," Tuppence added, "has been searching for the same answer since yesterday." The man in the grey overcoat. "Yes." A moment of silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the past pressing into the present. Then the telephone rang. Tommy answered instantly. "Beresford speaking." His expression hardened. "What? When?" "Dear God, yes, immediately." He hung up and turned to Tuppence, jaw tight. "That was Marwick." "What's happened?" "Sir Reginald Farah, attacked in his home." Tuppence gasped. "Is he—" "Alive, barely. Found unconscious, room ransacked, nothing stolen." "Except," Tuppence whispered, "the courage to speak." Tommy nodded grimly. "We're out of time. Someone wants this secret more desperately than we imagined." Tuppence rose, fire in her eyes. "Then let us find it first." Together they stepped toward the door, not just investigators now, but guardians of a truth threatening to surface after decades of dangerous silence. The landlady's voice drifted through the narrow hallway before they even reached her door. "He was a very polite gentleman," she was saying to someone unseen. "Foreign, yes, but the kind with careful manners. Asked after the water pressure, if you can imagine such a thing. Always anxious-looking, poor soul." Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a glance, their silent communication as fluent as ever. They stepped forward, and the landlady, a stout, bustling woman with cheeks like flushed dumplings, turned with a start. "Oh, you must be the couple Inspector Marwick said would come." Her hands fluttered, unsure which gesture might be most useful. "Do come in. Mind the umbrella stand. It's been wobbly ever since my nephew tripped over it during Christmas." The boarding house smelled faintly of boiled cabbage and old carpets, the scent of a place that had seen more secrets than renovations. Tuppence took in every detail: the polished banister, the faded rose-patterned wallpaper, the ticking clock that marked each second with disapproving precision. "We're looking into a man who was staying here," Tommy said gently. "Tall fellow, long grey overcoat." The landlady nodded vigorously. "Oh yes, that one. Foreign, polite, terribly anxious. Came in 2 nights ago. Paid in cash. Hardly slept, judging by the circles under his eyes. A man with trouble simmering in him, though he tried to hide it." Tuppence smiled reassuringly. "Did he give a name?" "He wrote down something like Mavogel." Tommy's brows lifted slightly. "Vogel. That name keeps returning," he murmured. "But his accent, German, I'd say, or Austrian. Hard to place. He left quite suddenly this morning. I doubt he'll be back." She bustled across the hall to a small table, lifting a small metal object from a drawer. "He left this behind, probably by accident. Clean as a whistle, but I don't trust myself meddling with men's belongings." It was a cigarette case. Silver. Slim, engraved with a stylized violet inside a circle. Tuppence inhaled sharply. "Tommy." He understood immediately. The same symbol as the pressed violet behind Mrs. Grant's drawer. The emblem of Intelligence Unit 14V. Carefully, Tuppence opened the case. Inside lay no cigarettes, only a curled, fragile strip of photographic film no larger than a fingernail. "My goodness," the landlady whispered. "Is that dangerous?" "Only if you're allergic to mysteries," Tuppence said lightly. Tommy slipped it safely into his breast pocket. We'll develop it. With your permission, we may also need to see the room he stayed in." "Of course," she said, lowering her voice dramatically, "but I should warn you, it's terribly untidy." Room 6 was not untidy. It was almost disturbingly neat. A packed suitcase sat on the bed, as if abandoned mid-checklist. A pair of gloves rested on the bedside table. A glass of half-finished water stood beside the lamp. Tuppence tilted her head. "He left in a hurry. People don't abandon half a glass of water unless interrupted." Tommy studied the suitcase, or unless they intend to return, but are prevented. Tuppence scanned the wardrobe, the bookshelf, the coat rack, her gaze fixed on a folded newspaper lying on the desk. "Look at this. Yesterday's Telegraph section. The advertisement column is circled." She looked closer. "There's a coded message printed here. Something about a violet bouquet delivered under moonlight. A phrase so poetic it must be suspicious." Tommy leaned over her shoulder. "Part of a communication network, perhaps. But we'll return to that." They searched further. No documents, no letters, no clues beyond the cigarette case and the peculiar newspaper. It was as though the man had lived here for a single, concentrated purpose, and then evaporated. When they descended the stairs again, the landlady was sorting the mail. She held up a telegram. "Funny thing, that arrived just after you went up, addressed to the gentleman in room 6. Tommy frowned. "May we?" "I suppose so," she said, handing it over. "If the police sent you, it must be important." He unfolded it. 3 words leapt off the page. "Proceed immediately. Others moving." Tuppence shivered. "Others. There's more than one party involved." Tommy nodded grimly, which means the race has already begun. They left Kensington with urgency pulsing beneath every step. The photographic strip curled inside Tommy's pocket like a fragile secret. Their first task was clear: find a laboratory capable of safely developing microfilm without asking intrusive questions. Tommy led them to a quiet photography shop off Marylebone High Street, run by a bespectacled man named Hargreaves who owed him a favour from the war. The bell chimed softly when they entered. Hargreaves looked up from behind the counter. "Mr. Beresford, it's been ages. Brought me something dangerous, have you?" "Only mildly explosive," Tommy said. "In the figurative sense." Hargreaves grinned. "Splendid. Come to the back." The shop's developing room was a dim sanctuary of chemical smells and soft red light. Tommy handed over the microfilm. Hargreaves inspected it with a jeweller's loupe, eyebrows rising. "Tiny, very tiny, but I can get something out of it. Give me an hour." Tuppence sat on a stool, crossing her legs elegantly. "Do be careful. It may be older than the 2 of us put together." Hargreaves saluted theatrically. "I shall treat it as if it were the crown jewels." He retreated into the inner room, leaving them with nothing but the hush of machinery and the soft ticking of the clock. Tommy exhaled. "Do you think the man in the grey overcoat is the enemy?" "No," Tuppence said firmly. "He's frightened. Men with sinister intentions usually hide that behind bravado. He showed only tension, desperation, and politeness. Villains rarely bother with pleasantries." "True," Tommy murmured. "He's running. But from whom?" "Whoever sent that telegram," she replied, "and whoever attacked Farah." Silence settled once more, a heavy blanket of questions without answers. Exactly 1 hour later, Hargreaves emerged carrying a small envelope. "It's unstable," he warned, "but legible enough." He laid the contact sheet on the counter, and Tuppence leaned in. The image was blurred, aged and incomplete, but unmistakably a photograph of a letter. Some lines were too faint to read, others appeared distorted, as though the original had been crumpled. But one phrase stood out clean and sharp. "Hitler's secret inside England, location secured by the Violet Code." Tuppence's breath caught. There, proof. Tommy felt a slow chill crawl down his spine. So the letter was real, and someone hid something in England, something Hitler feared. Hargreaves looked between them. "I'm guessing I shouldn't know more." "Correct," Tommy said. "Then pay me quickly," Hargreaves replied, "so I can forget immediately." Tommy obliged. They left the shop, stepping into the late afternoon noise of Marylebone. Buses rumbling, shopkeepers calling, footsteps echoing. Yet despite the bustle, Tuppence felt a single thread pulling taut around them, drawing them deeper into a labyrinth of wartime shadows. Tommy tucked the photograph safely into an inner pocket. "The violet code," he murmured. "We must find out what it is." "And soon," Tuppence added. "Others are moving." They walked briskly down the street. A bus engine growled. A paperboy shouted headlines. A cyclist rang his bell sharply as he swerved around a pedestrian. Life carried on around them, indifferent to the secret unfolding like a dangerous blossom. "Let's return to the boarding house," Tuppence said. "There may be something we missed." Tommy agreed. The landlady was surprised to see them return so quickly. "Forgot something?" "Possibly," Tuppence replied. "Or possibly we haven't yet realized what we were meant to find." Tommy approached the staircase. "May we check his room once more?" "As long as you put everything back," she said. "Boarders complain if their rooms look slightly different. They're like cats, very particular creatures." They climbed to room 6 again. This time, Tommy took a slow, deliberate walk around the room, examining every object with heightened scrutiny. Tuppence sifted through the small rubbish bin. He tore up paper scraps, receipts and what looks like a train timetable, but nothing revealing. Tommy examined the bedside table. The water glass. He may have drunk from it when he was interrupted. "Meaning?" she asked. "Meaning I doubt he left of his own free will." Something in his tone made her stop. "We must consider the possibility," Tommy continued, "that the man in the grey overcoat was taken." Tuppence's jaw tightened. "If that is true, then we're not simply following his trail, we're picking up where he was forced to stop." She crossed the small room once more, stopping at the suitcase. "Look at this. It's missing something." "What?" Tommy asked. "A false bottom. This suitcase is deep enough for one. Feel here. There's a seam." They lifted the case together. Tuppence pressed along the base. A thin sliver of air escaped from a hidden compartment, completely empty. "He had something in here," she said quietly, "and someone took it." Tommy straightened, meaning someone else reached him before he could flee. "And the telegram urged him to act quickly," she added. "Too late." They left the room, the landlady waiting anxiously at the bottom of the stairs. "Did you find what you needed?" Tommy answered with gentle honesty. "We found that your lodger was not running from the law, Mrs. Atkins. He was running from danger." She paled. "I knew he was troubled." "We'll do what we can," Tuppence assured her, "and we may return." They stepped back onto the street, carrying the photograph, the cigarette case, and the sense that the mystery had just deepened by several dangerous layers. Tommy looked toward the horizon. If the violet code secures the location, we must decipher it. "And the man in the grey overcoat," Tuppence added, "may be the only one who knew how." They walked on, the evening noises of London rising around them, but beneath the city's hum another sound pulsed, the quickening heartbeat of a secret racing to the surface, a secret Hitler had feared, and a secret someone was willing to kill to uncover. "Tommy, if you tell me this counts as a holiday, I shall smother you with the railway timetable," Tuppence declared as they stepped onto the platform at the small Oxfordshire station. A pigeon cooed suspiciously from the rafters above, as though taking sides. Tommy offered her a patient smile. "It's a pastoral interlude with higher stakes." "Yes," she said crisply. "A pastoral interlude with spies, death, and a mysterious German defector. Precisely the kind of restful jaunt every woman dreams of." Their suitcases thumped lightly onto the platform as the train hissed behind them, departing with a polite metallic sigh. The station was the kind of place where time moved more slowly than the clouds. One bench, one notice board, one attendant who seemed almost startled to see passengers at all. Beyond the station stretched the village of Briar Hollow, a patchwork of stone cottages, crooked chimneys, and uneven garden walls. It was a place that pretended fiercely to be ordinary. Tuppence, seasoned connoisseur of such facades, felt the prickle of concealed history beneath its stillness. "5 members of Intelligence Unit 14V stationed here," she murmured, unfolding her notes. 2 dead under odd circumstances, 1 missing within months of the war ending, and 2 still living. "And 1 German defector," Tommy added, whose presence was quietly expunged from most official records. "Which means," Tuppence concluded, "he was very important." The walk into the village took only 10 minutes, though each cottage seemed to offer a glimpse of someone's life frozen in comfortable routine. A wheelbarrow abandoned beside a hedgerow, laundry flapping gently on a clothesline, a postman with an expression suggesting life-altering boredom. But routine was the perfect hiding place for secrets. Tommy and Tuppence had learned that long ago. Their first interview lay at the far end of the village, where a small cottage leaned theatrically toward a crooked apple tree. A brass plaque on the gate declared, "Mr. Alistair Pritcham, retired." Retired from what was not specified, though the state of the cottage, meticulous bordering on obsessive, implied a man who had once lived for precision. Tuppence knocked firmly. A voice from inside barked, "If you're the vicar's wife selling raffle tickets, I've already contributed to the blasted roof repair twice." "Not a vicar, not a raffle," Tuppence called back cheerfully. "Only two nosy civilians with a fondness for puzzles." The door creaked open. Mr. Pritcham peered out, eyebrows like startled hedgehogs. His frame was slight, his spine stiff, and his gaze burdened by age and memory. "Who?" he demanded. "Tommy and Tuppence Beresford." Tommy extended a hand. "We're looking into events from your unit's wartime operations." The old man flinched. "Unit? What unit? I was a humble codebreaker, transcribed wireless nonsense, nothing more." Tuppence tilted her head. "Funny, we heard Intelligence Unit 14V was rather important here." Pritcham's lips tightened. His eyes darted down the lane. "Come inside, quickly." They followed him into a sitting room overflowing with books, maps, and yellowed papers stacked with military precision. A teacup sat untouched on a tray. Steam long vanished. "You shouldn't say the unit's name aloud," he whispered. "People forget things for a reason." Tommy sat gently. "We're not here to dredge up scandal. A woman died in London, Eloise Grant. Her husband worked with intercepted documents. She mentioned a secret Hitler feared." Pritcham stiffened, his fingers curling around the back of his armchair. That phrase again, the one message Hitler feared. Tuppence leaned forward. "You've heard it before." "Heard it?" His voice trembled. "I muttered it in my sleep for years. Heard it whispered in corridors by men who never appeared on official rosters." He lowered himself into his chair. There was a message, a terrible one. Not terrible for what it said, terrible for what it proved. Tommy exchanged a glance with Tuppence but let the old man continue. "A German officer defected in 44, one of Hitler's own, brought something across the Channel, something he said must reach England should Germany fall to tyranny." "He trusted England that much?" Tuppence asked softly. "He trusted someone in England," Pritcham replied. "A young courier codenamed the Violet, a German boy, barely 20, gentle, brilliant, knee-deep in danger. He handled the transfer. And then, Tommy prompted. "He disappeared. Gone, like smoke." Pritcham rubbed his forehead. "We decrypted a fragment, barely anything left of the message. But I remember that phrase, the one about Hitler's secret being hidden inside England, and that the location was secured by the Violet Code." "Does the Violet Code mean anything to you?" Tuppence asked. Pritcham shook his head. "I only handled half of the cipher reports. Violet worked directly with our field team, the ones who travelled between safe houses." "Where can we find one of them?" Tommy asked. The old man hesitated. "Only one courier still lives. Name's Bernard Hale, sharp eyes, sharper tongue. Keeps to himself now. Lives near the edge of the village in a cottage overlooking the old estate." "The abandoned estate?" Tuppence repeated. "Used as a wartime safe house?" Pritcham looked sharply at her. "Don't go near it. That place carries ghosts, not the supernatural sort, the bureaucratic sort. The ones who bury secrets in notebooks and pretend they never existed." Tuppence smiled grimly. "We've met a few of those ourselves." Pritcham sagged back into his chair, exhaustion creeping over his features. "If Hale is still alive, he may help you, but tread carefully. Some truths are barbed. Pull too hard and you bleed." Bernard Hale's cottage perched at the edge of the village like an observant owl. It was small, weathered, and accompanied by a garden where untamed roses grew with a determination that suggested they feared no pruning shears. Tommy knocked. Silence. He knocked again. At last, the door opened a sliver, revealing one sharp grey eye and half a suspicious scowl. "Who are you?" "Tuppence and Tommy Beresford," Tuppence answered warmly. "We're inquiring about Intelligence Unit 14V. "We don't discuss such things," Hale snapped, attempting to shut the door. Tommy caught it gently. "A woman died in London. A man in a grey overcoat is missing, and someone attacked Sir Reginald Farrar." Hale froze. "Farrar?" he repeated slowly. Still breathing? Barely, Tommy replied. Hale opened the door fully. Inside, quickly. The interior of the cottage reflected the personality of its owner, lean, spare, and shrewd. No clutter, no ornaments, only the essentials. Hale moved stiffly, age etched into his posture but not his gaze. Why are you digging up corpses from a war that ended decades ago? He demanded. Because people tied to it are dying again, Tuppence said. Hale grunted, unimpressed but listening. What do you want from me? Truth, Tommy said simply. The old courier snorted. Truth is an expensive luxury, but very well. He sank into a wooden chair. 4 of us transported a sealed package near the end of the war. Orders were unusual. No record, no logging, no questions. That alone should have sent us running. What happened? Tuppence asked. Hale's fingers twitched nervously. The package arrived at the estate. We handed it off to a liaison. 3 months later, 2 of my team were dead. Accidents, they said. He spat the word. The third, he simply vanished. Did anyone open the package? Tommy asked. No, Hale's voice lowered. Not officially, but someone else did. Someone high enough to silence it. And then everything connected to Violet, the boy, the defector, the message, was scattered into locked drawers or erased. Tuppence felt a chill. Why are you still afraid? Hale shot her a sharp look. Because I know what governments do to protect themselves, and because the man in the grey overcoat came by here 2 days ago. Tommy straightened. He did? He asked about the package, about Violet, about the defector. Hale's tone shifted, worry creeping in. He wasn't a threat. He was hunted. Hunted by who? I didn't ask. Some questions shorten your lifespan. Tuppence caught the tremor in his hand. You're steering us away from the estate. Hale's jaw tightened. Why? She pressed. Because that place is a grave with open eyes, he whispered. Whatever happened there is still dangerous. Tommy spoke gently. We need to see it. Hale shook his head vehemently. No, I won't go near it, and neither should you. Tuppence rose. Thank you, Mr. Hale. You've told us more than you realize. He didn't walk them to the door. He simply looked away, as though afraid the past might step through the doorway behind them. The estate lay beyond a narrow path that wound between quiet fields and old stone walls. Tuppence felt the landscape shift subtly as they approached, a faint pressure in the air like the hush before a confession. The estate itself rose from the ground in a solemn silhouette. 3 stories of crumbling stone, dark windows, and overgrown hedges trying to reclaim the facade. Ivy clung like a memory that refused to fade. It looks abandoned, Tommy said softly. It looks watchful, Tuppence corrected. They approached with careful steps, taking in the silence that wrapped around the building like a cloak. A broken fountain sat in the courtyard, its dry basin littered with leaves. The air felt thick with the remnants of conversations long buried. Tommy examined the ground. Someone's been here recently. The footprints, fresh, deliberate, marked the soft earth leading toward a side entrance. Tuppence crouched beside them, measuring the stride. Large, firm steps, not elderly, not timid. Same size as the grey overcoat man? Tommy asked. Possibly, but look, 2 different sets overlap, one older, one newer. Meaning there are at least 2 parties moving through here, Tommy said. Tuppence nodded grimly. Bernard Hale was right. This place is a nest. As they circled toward the back of the estate, Tommy stopped abruptly. Tuppence. She joined him. In the grass lay a crumpled piece of paper. Carefully she lifted it. A train ticket, London to Oxfordshire, dated that morning. Tuppence inhaled sharply. Tommy, he's here. Oh, the man in the grey overcoat, Tommy said. He reached the estate before us. Or, she said, voice low, someone has forced him to come here. They stood there, the cold ticket trembling between them, the weight of the past pressing down like unseen hands. The estate loomed behind them, its shadow stretching long across the ground. We're running out of time, Tommy murmured. Tuppence closed the distance to his side, eyes fixed on the silent windows. Yes, she said, and so is he. With the ticket clutched firmly, they walked toward the hidden entrance, into the heart of a secret that refused to stay buried. The estate did not creak when Tommy and Tuppence stepped through its decaying side entrance. It sighed, as though it recognized them as the next keepers of a long and weary secret. The sound echoed faintly through the hollow corridor beyond, carrying dust motes that danced in the slanting beams of afternoon light. Tuppence paused just inside, letting her eyes adjust, her breath a calm, steady rhythm in the unsettling stillness. Tommy closed the door behind them, careful not to disturb anything more than necessary. "Comforting," Tuppence murmured quietly. "It feels like a house that swallowed its last occupant whole and is still digesting." Tommy offered a faint smile. "Your imagery becomes more disturbing by the day." "I'm simply adapting to the atmosphere," she replied, stepping forward. The corridor stretched before them like the throat of some great, slumbering beast. Wallpaper peeled in ragged strips. Floorboards sagged ominously. The air smelled of ancient wood and forgotten paper, a scent Tuppence privately associated with secrets that refused to die. They moved slowly, testing each board with deliberate steps. Every sound echoed too loudly. Every shadow seemed to linger a fraction of a second longer than it should. "This estate was meant to be abandoned," Tommy said softly, "but it feels as though someone still listens." "It's what happens when too many unsaid things accumulate in one place," Tuppence replied. They reached a wide central hall where a grand staircase rose in a dramatic sweep toward the upper floors. The banister was broken in one place. The chandelier overhead hung at a crooked tilt, as though mortally wounded. A faint draught stirred one of the heavy curtains. Tommy moved toward the door beneath the staircase, one marked on old wartime sketches they had found referenced indirectly in Pritcham's scattered notes. "The safe-house rooms were primarily on the ground floor," he said. "This should lead to the old study." When he pushed it open, the hinges groaned in protest. Inside lay a large chamber lined with dusty shelves still laden with mouldering books. Papers littered the floor, pages scattered as though someone had ransacked the place or stormed through in a hurry. A thick layer of dust coated the desk in the corner, undisturbed except for a faint trail of smudges that were suspiciously recent. Tuppence crossed to the far wall. "Look at this," she whispered. Near the shelves, a faint mark of violet chalk traced a small, almost invisible symbol. Tommy drew closer, eyebrows raised. The same insignia again. Violet. Tuppence reached out, brushing the edge of the chalk lightly with her finger. It was put here deliberately. A wayfinder, perhaps, or a code marker. Her hand drifted along the bookshelf, stopping at a shallow groove. "Tommy," she said softly, "help me. A chosen book should release something." Together they pressed along the spines, searching for resistance. At last, Tommy felt a loose one, an old atlas with crumbling edges. He tugged, and with a metallic clack the entire shelf shifted inward. The hidden door swung open. The narrow space beyond exhaled a breath of stale, untouched air. It was a small room, no bigger than a modest pantry, yet the sight inside struck them both with the force of a revelation. Maps clung to the walls, tacked in orderly rows. Handwritten notes in German and English covered sheets pinned to a corkboard. A small wooden table in the centre displayed yellowed newspapers in multiple languages, German, English, French, dated from 1943 to 1945. A rusted metal box lay on the table, closed but with its lid slightly askew. Tuppence stepped forward reverently. "It's been left untouched since the war." Tommy approached the box, lifting the lid. It opened easily, revealing an interior perfectly empty. No lining, no false bottom, no documents. "Someone got here first," he said quietly. "But very recently," Tuppence murmured, pointing to the floor. A pressed violet lay near the box, beautifully preserved but fresh, too fresh to have survived decades in a dusty room. And beside it, a small notebook. The cover was cracked with age, but the ink on its title page was clear. German script. Tuppence picked it up carefully. Not Violet's insignia, someone else's handwriting. She flipped through the first few pages. But this word, Erbe, it appears repeatedly. "Legacy," Tommy translated. "Inheritance," or heritage. Tuppence turned pages slowly, scanning lines of German text. These entries read like reflections, bits of philosophical musings, notes about truth and loyalty and fear, but parts are missing, torn out. Tommy bent to inspect the candle on the nearby table. It was half burnt, wax hardened in a puddle around its base, but still warm to the touch. "He was here minutes ago," Tommy said, "the man in the grey overcoat. He must have fled when he heard us enter." "And he dropped the violet," Tuppence added quietly. "Symbolic, perhaps, a sign he wants us to follow, or a sign of panic." She resumed scanning the room. "The dust on the floor has been recently displaced. Someone was searching frantically." "For the metal box," Tommy said. "For something that used to be inside." He returned to the maps, examining marks and annotations. This room was a planning centre. The defector, the Violet Courier, they used this place. The secret was brought here, hidden here, or transferred from here. Tuppence gazed again at the empty metal box, and whatever was inside terrified Farrar enough to shut us out. Tommy was about to respond when a faint shuffle outside made them both stiffen. The sound came from the corridor beyond the hidden entrance. A footstep, a breath, something moving. Tuppence lowered her voice to a whisper. "Tommy, someone's here." He nodded silently. A moment later, a shadow crossed the crack of light beneath the bookshelf door. Tuppence's grip tightened on the notebook. Tommy reached slowly for the fireplace poker in the corner. Silence. Then, the hidden door swung inward with a sudden force. A man stumbled in, breath ragged, eyes wide with terror. The long grey overcoat, dishevelled and dusty, hung heavily on his shoulders. His hair was damp with sweat, and his hands trembled violently. He shut the door behind him and pressed his back against it, chest heaving. "No time," he gasped. "You must listen before they find me." Tommy lowered the poker but remained alert. "You're Vogel's grandson," the man nodded desperately. "My grandfather, the defector, you know this. Then you know why they're hunting us." "We know there was a message," Tuppence said calmly. "A secret Hitler considered catastrophic. What was it?" He shook his head. "I don't know the full truth. Only what my grandfather told my father, and what my father told me, that Hitler buried a truth so dangerous it could tear down his myth, his authority, his very image. But the secret was not about power. It was something human, something he wanted erased forever." He reached out, gripping Tuppence's arm. "My grandfather swore England must keep it safe. Only if England ever fell under tyranny, like Germany had, should the truth be revealed. It was meant as a moral safeguard, a legacy, an inheritance for a dark future." Tuppence studied him. "The Violet Code. Is it a cipher?" "A cipher and a system," he said, "based on locations, people, symbols. But the key my grandfather carried, was taken from me 2 days ago in London." Tommy frowned. "Taken by who?" The man swallowed hard. "A group. Modern extremists. They want the truth not to protect it, but to destroy Germany's fragile reconciliation, to stir hatred. They believe the truth, whatever it is, will weaponize the past." "And what do you want?" Tuppence asked. His eyes filled with tears of frustration. "To protect it, because my grandfather died for it, and my father spent his life hiding its existence." Tommy took a step forward. "Who attacked Farrar?" "The same man hunting me, a professional, always one step behind me." Tuppence felt the air shift, an instinctive awareness before the sound came. A crack split the silence. The man jerked violently, eyes widening in shock as a blossom of red spread across his chest. He crumpled, falling backward into Tommy's arms. Tommy lowered him gently, pressing a hand to the wound. "Stay with us. Just hold on." But the man shook his head, choking out a final whisper. "Find the truth before they—" His voice faded, his body slackened, his eyes lost focus. Tuppence rose abruptly, racing to the small window. Outside, she saw only the faint blur of movement. A figure sprinting across the courtyard, slipping into the trees. "The assassin!" she hissed. "He shot from outside." Tommy knelt over the fallen man, jaw clenched. He never stood a chance. Tuppence forced herself into motion. "We must go. If the killer is still nearby, he may circle back." Tommy nodded grimly. "And if he isn't, someone else might." They moved with swift precision. Tuppence scooped up the German notebook. Tommy gathered the pressed violet and the candle stub. They left the empty metal box. It offered nothing now. The hidden door clicked shut behind them. The corridor outside felt even darker, the air thicker. charged with the presence of violence. Their footsteps seemed too loud, the floorboards groaning beneath their weight as though warning the estate itself that the world had shifted. They reached the side entrance. Tommy pushed it open. The fresh air hit them with the sting of cold clarity. They fled across the courtyard, keeping low, listening for pursuit. None came, only the whisper of leaves and the faint hum of distant traffic. Once they reached the cover of the trees, Tuppence stopped, breath-catching. Tommy, we lost him, and we lost answers with him. Tommy looked back toward the forsaken estate, expression set in grim resolve. We have something, Tuppence. A notebook, a clue, a word repeated over and over. Erbe, she whispered. Legacy. Tommy nodded. Whatever Hitler buried, whatever the Violet Code guards, it was meant as an inheritance for England's darkest moment. Someone wants to twist it into something monstrous. Tuppence closed her hand tightly around the notebook. Then we will find it first. Together they disappeared into the woods, leaving behind the dying echo of gunfire, a corpse with untold truths, and a safe house that had finally given up a fragment of its long-held secret. The past was awake now, and it was hunting. Inspector Marwick's office was not built for secrets. It was built for paperwork, endless towering stacks of it, threatening to collapse like poorly constructed battlements. Yet on this day, the cluttered room felt like the war room of a brewing conflict. Marwick himself stood at the centre of it all, tie crooked, spectacles low on his nose, a grim bitterness tightening his jaw. You two are becoming a regular menace to my blood pressure, he growled as Tommy and Tuppence stepped inside. Then you should consider that we're free entertainment, Tuppence replied lightly, though her expression betrayed a deeper concern. We've brought news you won't enjoy. Marwick didn't blink. Farrar is still unconscious. Doctors don't know what hit him. I suspect a professional blow, silent, precise, intended to keep him alive but quiet. Tommy nodded. The same man killed the grandson at the estate. Marwick's hand froze above his desk. Killed? Clean shot through the chest, Tuppence said softly. He died before we could get him help. A silence fell, the weight of it thick with unspoken consequences. Marwick sank into his chair. So our murderer is escalating. He's also disciplined, Tommy added. Never leaves a footprint, never hesitates, never reveals more than he intends. Marwick opened a dossier. We've narrowed suspects to one mercenary, ex-Special Forces. No official name, but goes by various monikers. The Wraith, Grey Jackal, Hans Dieter, the sort of fellow who slips through borders like mist, hired by extremist groups dedicated to reviving old wartime narratives. They romanticize the Reich, distort history, twist facts. He shoved the folder forward. They've been growing louder in recent years. Too loud. Tuppence scanned the documents. Photographs of a man whose features blurred, a face defined by its ability to be forgotten, hard eyes, controlled posture, a man shaped by shadows. He took the key from the grandson, Tommy said, the Violet Code key. Marwick rubbed his forehead. We traced him from London to Oxfordshire. He's moving fast and moving first. Then we must move faster, Tuppence said simply. Tommy placed the German notebook on Marwick's desk. This belonged to the grandson's father. We think it contains pieces of the Violet Code. Marwick flipped through it. I'll have a linguist. No, Tuppence interrupted, not unkindly. Too dangerous. Too many people at the yard. We have enemies in the wind. Tommy leaned forward. Tuppence has already cracked part of it. Marwick raised a brow. Already? It's in German. Tuppence shrugged elegantly. I've always been decent at languages, and the Violet Code seems partly symbolic. Look here. She flipped to a page where numbers were scribbled beside brief notes. These correspond to towns in Oxfordshire, and these 1944 census entries. Tommy nodded. Cross-checking them gives us a trail of safe house caches. Several might still hold information. Marwick stood sharply. Then we go together. But Tuppence shook her head. No, the assassin is hunting those same spots. If you approach them with officers, you'll draw too much attention. We need subtlety, quiet movement. Just us. Marwick hated it. They saw the conflict ripple across his features. At last he exhaled sharply. Fine, but I'll give you backup discreetly nearby. Backup? Tuppence smiled. Or a welcoming committee if we fail?" "Don't fail," Marwick said flatly. The church stood alone at the edge of a disused lane, its tall spire leaning slightly as though gossiping with the clouds. The sign beside the gate read, "St. Bartholomew's, decommissioned 1961. The paint was peeling, the silence heavier than expected. Tommy glanced around carefully. According to the notebook, one cache lies beneath this building. Tuppence lifted the rusted latch on the gate. Cache number 6, if the sequence is correct, meaning 5 have likely already been emptied. They stepped onto the worn stone path leading to the entrance. The nave inside was shadowy, though sunlight pierced in thin shafts through the cracked stained-glass windows, painting fractured colours across the ancient pews. Dust coated everything in a thick grey blanket. "Churches should not smell like abandoned promises," Tuppence observed quietly. Tommy ran a hand along the back of a pew. The trapdoor should be beneath the choir stand. Old intelligence records mentioned sub-basement storage. They approached the far end of the nave. Beneath the raised wooden platform of the choir stand, Tommy found a recessed metal ring. He lifted. The trapdoor opened with a deep groan. A narrow staircase led into darkness. The cold rising from it felt like a breath from the past. Tuppence produced a small torch from her bag. "Shall we?" Tommy followed her down the steps. Dust swirled in their wake, whispering as though warning that intruders were unwelcome. The basement was cramped, brick walls, stone floor, and a long, narrow corridor leading to several alcoves. Old crates labelled with wartime ministries lined the walls, but most had been broken open, emptied long ago. Tommy checked the notebook. Cache 6 should be on the right. Tuppence lifted the torch. A wooden compartment lay embedded in the wall, its door slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Empty. Only a faint outline in the dust suggested something rectangular once lay inside. "And so," she murmured, "we confirm our assassin is sprinting ahead of us." Tommy scanned the area. He couldn't have emptied these all alone. Someone must be helping him identify locations. "Or," Tuppence said, "he has his own copy of the Violet Code, or part of it." They checked 2 more compartments, both empty. Not even scraps remained. Tuppence moved to the final alcove. Just one left. Inside lay the tiniest hint of hope, a single scrap of paper, wedged in the back corner, overlooked entirely. She retrieved it carefully. A torn piece of old ledger paper, brittle yet legible. On it, "Final repository, where England keeps her memories." Tuppence's pulse quickened. "Tommy!" He stared at the paper. "It can only mean one thing." "The British Museum," Tuppence said, voice low. Footsteps echoed above. They froze. Tommy extinguished the torch. Silence enveloped them. The footsteps were steady, unhurried, too precise to belong to a casual intruder. Tuppence whispered, "He's here." A beam of light swept across the church floor above, the unmistakable arc of a flashlight wielded by someone trained to search methodically. Tommy guided Tuppence deeper into the shadows. They pressed into a dark corner behind an old column, breath held. Above them, the steps moved slowly, measured, deliberate. A quiet creak followed as weight shifted at the choir stand. The trapdoor groaned. Tuppence's breath caught. Light spilled down the staircase, cutting through the darkness in a narrow slice. The assassin descended one step, then another. Tommy gripped a fallen metal pipe, every muscle poised. Tuppence raised her torch, ready to blind rather than strike. The steps paused halfway. Then, the assassin suddenly withdrew. The trapdoor slammed shut. They stood motionless for several seconds. Tommy released his breath. Something spooked him. Tuppence nodded. "Or his time is running short. He has what he needs from this place, and we've taken too long." They waited until silence returned fully before climbing back to the nave. When they emerged, the church appeared as empty and indifferent as before. But Tuppence felt the shift. Their assassin was accelerating. Inspector Marwick received them in a discreet tea-house 2 streets from Scotland Yard, choosing a corner booth shielded from prying eyes. The air smelled of bergamot and warm pastries, an almost luxurious contrast to the shadows they had been moving through. "Well?" he demanded the moment they sat down. Tommy handed him the scrap of paper. "We found this. Everything else was already taken." Marwick examined it. The British Museum. Yes, that fits. Their archives are enormous. Tuppence's eyes glittered. And heavily guarded, which means our assassin will require finesse and urgency. Marwick rubbed his chin. I'll put quiet eyes in that area. No uniforms, Tuppence insisted. If the assassin suspects a trap, he'll vanish. Marwick's sigh carried both frustration and reluctant agreement. Fine. Plain clothes only. No disruptions. Tommy tapped the German notebook. There's something else. Tuppence opened it to a different set of cross-referenced pages. The violet code doesn't work like normal ciphers. It uses census numbers, but also pairs them with wartime sites, safe houses, communication hubs, burial records. It's brilliant, layered, redundant. Marwick frowned. Meaning? Tommy answered. Meaning we haven't yet discovered everything the notebook reveals. There may be a second-level code we haven't cracked, something that explains why the British Museum is the final repository. Tuppence nodded. The grandson said the truth Hitler feared was human, something that would dismantle a myth. Marwick leaned forward. But what truth? Tuppence closed the notebook. We won't know until we reach the final cache. And we'll need to get there before the assassin does, Tommy added. Marwick's voice lowered. We also intercepted a communication. One of the extremist groups is gathering tonight. They're talking about retrieving a legacy denied. Tuppence's fingers tightened around her teacup. Then they believe the truth will shift the political landscape. And history loves nothing more than being twisted, Tommy murmured. Marwick pushed back his cup. Then this is where things get serious. You find the repository. I'll contain what perimeter I can. Tuppence smiled faintly. Do be careful, Inspector. The world needs at least one grumpy realist wandering around. Marwick scowled. Just stay alive. Tommy and Tuppence walked through the London evening, the city lights flickering in warm golden pockets. The streets hummed with activity, shops closing, buses rattling past, people chattering, but none of it touched the simmering tension between them. Tommy spoke first. The British Museum is enormous. We can't just wander in and hope something reveals itself. No, Tuppence agreed. But the notebook references specific phrases: legacy, inheritance, England's memory, and another word I noticed, here. She pointed to a page where the word Samlung collection was underlined thrice. Collections, Tommy mused, meaning not public displays, but stored archives. Yes, Tuppence said, possibly the restricted manuscripts or secured wartime files. Tommy took her hand briefly. We're close, Tuppence. Terrifyingly close. She squeezed his fingers. We've been close to danger before. But this, he said softly, is history trying to correct itself through violence. Tuppence let go, drawing a deep breath. Then we must make sure history chooses the right hands. They reached their townhouse, but neither felt truly at rest as they stepped inside. Tuppence laid the notebook on the table. Tommy poured 2 cups of coffee. Not tea, not tonight. They needed clarity more than comfort. Tuppence sat, flipping page by page again, seeking patterns she might have missed. The notes were sparse but emotional, fragments of fear, courage, regret. The defector's words haunted the margins like ghosts. Tommy leaned over her shoulder. The grandson said the truth was something Germany later denied, perhaps an act of conscience by officers. Tuppence tilted her head. Or a list, a confession, a map. Tommy nodded slowly. And if Hitler wished it erased, it might reveal betrayal from inside his inner circle. Which, Tuppence said softly, would destroy the myth of invincible loyalty he cultivated. She closed the notebook. Whatever it is, it's enough to cause murder in the present. Their telephone rang, sharp, urgent. Tommy answered. Beresford speaking. Marwick's voice crackled urgently. We have reports. Someone matching the assassin's description was seen near the museum, carrying a concealed case. When? Tommy demanded. 10 minutes ago. Tuppence was already on her feet, coat in hand. Tommy hung up. We must go now, she nodded. The final repository waits. Outside, the city seemed to move faster, as though sensing the approaching collision of past and present. Taxi lights glimmered. People hurried. A quiet tension threaded itself through the streets. As they climbed into a cab, Tommy allowed himself one brief moment of reflection. We're chasing a secret the world wasn't meant to know. Tuppence looked at him, eyes steady. And if that secret can prevent future horrors, even by revealing past truths, then we must protect it. The cab sped toward Bloomsbury. The museum awaited, silent, immense, ancient. The truth Hitler feared was there, tucked in one of its countless drawers or vaults or forgotten shelves, and someone else was already closing in. The conflict was no longer historical, it was now.